chapter number 8. Romans chapter number 8. If you would. All right, this morning I want to speak to you about hope or expectation as we perceive it in the Scripture in chapter number 8. As we look at this passage, verses 18 to 30 in Romans chapter number 8, we have an outline for us in this chapter, and this is actually the last chapter concerning justification that Paul writes, beginning chapter 1 through chapter number 8. And what we see here is this, very basically. In verses 18 to 22, you have the hope of creation. Then in verses 23, 24, and 25, you have the hope of the believer. And then 26 through 30, you have the hope of the Spirit of God. Hey, you all follow me so far? Pretty simple. Now, as you look at this, though, you have to put it within a context. And the context actually begins in verse number 1, but we're not going to go back that far. Verse number 12 through 17. Watch what it says here. So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if you live by the Spirit, you put to death the deeds of the body, you will what? You will live. Okay? For all who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself bears witness with our spirit that we are what? Children of God. Now that's important, because as we come down to verse 26, likewise the Spirit helps us in our weaknesses. So if you're a child of God, what do you have? You have the Spirit of God. And that's very important. Verse 17. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with Him, in order that we may also be glorified with Him. So as we look at this passage here, what we're going to find is that there's an element of suffering that's within the context of hope. Suffering, hope. Now that's important. Romans 8:18, where he says, For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed in us. So there is going to be a what? A suffering. Say. Now this is spoken by, I have written down apostolic inspiration and from heart's experience. In other words, Paul in his Christian life experienced what suffering was. You say. Okay? So, in some things, Paul's humility caused him to say that he was the least of all the saints. Say, if you look at Ephesians 3:8, 1 Corinthians 15:9, even of the other apostles. But when it comes to his suffering, Paul said, I more. Turn back with me to 2 Corinthians, please, chapter 11. We'll go through this suffering just quickly here before we get to our actual study. Chapter 11 of 2 Corinthians, and we pick it up in verse 23. It says this, Are they servants of Christ? I am a better one. I am talking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings, and often near death. So what's he talking about? Sufferings. He said, I'm talking like a madman. He's going to let you know here, right? 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea. On frequent journeys, and danger from rivers, dangers from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brethren. In toil and hardship, though many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there was a daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the what? For all the churches. And then he says, Who is weak? Am I not weak? Who is made to fall? Am I not indignant? If I must boast, I will boast of things that show my what? In other words, what were the things that showed his weakness? His sufferings. All right, if you can follow that. His sufferings. But yet, what's he say in Romans chapter 8 verse 18, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that's going to be what? Revealed in us. Then I come back to chapter 4. 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter number 4. Verses 17 and 18, where Paul says this, for this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an Aeonian weight of glory beyond all comparison. So I go right along with Romans 8:18. Beyond all comparison. As we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. Now, how many times have you heard that preached? That the context is with suffering. Things that are seen and things that are not. What's seen? The sufferings that we go through. What's unseen? The glory, you say. As we look not to things that are seen, but to things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, temporary, right? But the things that are unseen are Aeonian. ESV says eternal there. So y'all follow that Paul's thinking here so far. Now one more place, chapter 5, verse number 4. For while we are still in this tent, what's the tent here? Body. Your body. Okay? We groan, being what? Whoa. What are you burdened about?
All the things that go on.
Suffering.
Yeah.
There's mental suffering, emotional suffering, physical suffering. There's all sorts of suffering. Self-imposed suffering.
Oh, yeah.
Things that will come upon you as a believer in Jesus Christ. Most of those, they are mental things. All right? So, he says, so as long as we're in his tent, we groan, being burdened. Not that we would be unclothed or dead, but with that we would be further clothed, so that so what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. So he's looking for his new body here, right? So when we're looking here, let me ask you, I put a note, suffering in glory. That's what we're looking at. What's your perspective of it? Especially with suffering.
We don't suffer like some people suffer.
Oh, forget that.
Oh.
Just forget that. What's your particular perspective of suffering in your life? Yes, dear.
Having gone through what I just went through, I had to learn one of Sue's favorite sayings, it is what it is. And you do it. And you go through it.
Okay.
And you're thankful, believe it or not.
Yeah.
That's my perspective.
Anybody else have anything else? Dan.
Well, just like it says in Romans 8, it doesn't matter what you go through right now, whether it's physical, mental.
There you go.
There is nothing in this short life that will compare to what we're going to see.
Amen.
Okay.
So everything that you go through now, I feel almost you should take advantage of it to build who you are and your character in Christ. So that, like I said, so that when you're there.
Yeah. There's a frailty in being human.
Yeah.
These bodies of humility.
Yeah.
And you can't get away from it now. That's right. Come over to back to chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians, please. Okay. Now let me give you Paul's perspective. Remember Paul was given a thorn in the flesh?
Yeah.
Messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited.
Yep.
In other words, this was given to Paul to keep him humble.
Yeah.
But he 3 times pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me, he says. Now, I have no idea what it is. I've heard so many things
Yeah.
on what it could be. All right? But verse 9 says this. He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may what? Rest upon you. Now we just read something like this.
Yeah.
If I glory in anything, it's going to be my weaknesses. All right? Now, what's Paul's bottom line here? It's the grace of God. Now let me see if I can do this. I have been, for years and years and years, we are dispensational in our thinking. There are many things that apply to Israel with the kingdom, earthly kingdom, that do not apply to the body of Christ We've already been translated into the kingdom of his dear Son. We know it's a heavenly realm, okay? And it has nothing to do with the flesh.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's correct. Yet, when we ask for prayer,
Yeah.
where prayer is all about.
Fleshly. Fleshly, right.
Heal this guy, heal that guy, do this, do that. Now, I think what we have to understand is this. Paul says, or God said to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. What's that mean? The bottom line here. Now, who dwells within us?
Christ.
Okay, magnify that. That I've been trying to share with you. That you still haven't caught a hold of it.
God is within.
The very creator of the universe, the fullness of who God is, dwells within you. Romans 8 says you have the Spirit of the Father, the Spirit of the Son. Some people say, well, that's one Spirit. I don't think it is. Because you got two individuals there. Okay? Here's the whole thing with suffering, folks. And it's not an easy concept, especially if you're not a reader of the Scriptures. All right? It is this. We still want to ask for healing. We still want to see miracles. But healings and miracles were given as signs to whom? For an earthly kingdom.
Yeah.
Never says that they're going to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. We're here for a certain purpose. That purpose, God's calling out sons that are going to be conformed to the image of His Son. Now, name me one time in the Gospel accounts where Jesus was delivered. You think of any? No, he hid himself from the crowd and they're going to throw him over the cliff. But he was weary, no place lay his head, he can go, etc., etc., etc. He had to put up with all the nonsense from the Pharisees. He wasn't delivered from anything. Okay? But yet we want to be delivered from everything. You know, and it doesn't matter.
Didn't he say to Pilate that if the kingdom was of this world, he would call his armies and they would fight for him?
That's right.
But his kingdom is not of this world.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, in the trial.
Yeah. Even at that time it wasn't, because it's still to come.
Right. Right.
Now here's I think is the bottom line. I believe what the bottom line is. All right? And that's this. We suffer in the normal course of living because we're human. Our humanity. And we're frail. What God does, here's what I believe. He takes that suffering, and when you submit to the fact of who He is and what He is, He replaces in you His Son. That's what it's all about. That's why my grace is sufficient. Paul finally 3 times asked, no, it's me in you that's sufficient. All right? And that's the development of Jesus Christ within us, so that, now think of it this way, and we're going to talk about this a little more here next time I speak to you. Adam chose two trees he had chosen. He chose the wrong one because he wanted to be like whom? Instead, he went the way of the God of this world. Instead of staying with the tree of life, he would have become like the Son of God, the Creator, the Word, you see. Just like in Romans 8:29. But he chose the other way. Now I'm going to say this to you. And this is going to be on the tape. It's blasphemy and heresy to ask for things that don't pertain to the body of Christ that you read. People, you want to know why people are so messed up when it comes to the doctrine of the body of Christ? Because they're going backwards to other dispensations. They want to bring what He did for the Jews and certain people there, so He must do it here. See? No, it's a different purpose. Are you with me here? There's a different purpose today. The purpose today is to conform us to the image of His dear Son. All right? And I think what He's doing, He wants to make us qualified. Because Paul had to become qualified. He's a son of God. He's a son of God by birth, in that he believed on the Lord Jesus Christ. But in life, you might say, standing state, you have to become qualified. And let me ask you a question. You take a young Christian, and when I say young Christian, somebody just got saved, doesn't matter what their age is, all right? How much can that person glorify God compared to a saint that's somebody's been saved for 40, 50 years and been faithful to God? And what is the difference? They can sing the same songs, sing the same prayers.
Christian maturity.
Okay, it's the experience of life and the suffering with Christ in you that makes the qualification. You know, we can talk about this forever, actually. You know how many people, Christians, are mad at God for who they are? The family they were born in, this and that, like God had anything to do with that. See? I mean, you know, once in a while I think, Lord, if you would just make me a Rockefeller. See? I would never have to work. You know, that's how we think, isn't it? Okay? So, the deal about suffering, and this is important, because there's a purpose involved in it. The purpose is of removing the old, because we are new, right? And so, getting rid of what taints us in our relationship with God, and filling us full of Christ. Now, let's go back to Romans 8.
Richard,
Go ahead, dear.
how do you pray for somebody that's asking you constantly to pray for them, but they're not saved, or they don't have?
Well, if there's not saved, there's nothing you can do. It's say, well, I'll pray for your salvation. I'll pray that you finally understand who Jesus Christ is and enter into a relationship with Him. That's what you do. You know. Listen, there comes a point in time when you tell the unsaved man, it doesn't do me any good to pray for your healing. You're not going to give God glory for it anyway. Are you still going to a doctor? Don't talk to me about healing when you're going to a doctor.
Well, how much sense?
Yeah, you still, well, government makes you have insurance now. But if you're going to the doctor and being, you know, that's not a miracle then. It's so what I pray for is like with Nancy, the Lord just, I hope the doctor's sober of his right mind when he's doing it. You know, put her knee back together right and correctly. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's only 120 years total in the history of man where there's any signs and wonders. And they all point to what? Earthly kingdom. Okay? For one more time. Moses and Joshua there. Then you have Elijah and Elisha. And then you have the Lord's ministry and the apostles. Let me just say this. We suffer because we are human. I mean, your neighbor who's not saved is going to suffer as much as you. So it's all in the perspective. See? And God taking you to mold you. You know, what we want to forget is the passage where, you know, God's the clay, and if it doesn't like it, He smashes it and starts it again. And I perceive that's how it is in suffering. He's smashing you until you accept what He wants to make you again, and then we go with it. So that brings us into Romans 8, verse 18. All right, verses 18. Now we'll look at creation here this morning, 18 through 22. All right, 18 through 22. Talking about the hope or the expectation of creation. And we're talking about creation, we're talking about subhuman creation here. In other words, we look outside and say nature. Nature's beautiful. You know, snow-covered, beautiful, right? As we see it here this morning. So, verse number 19 says, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." Now, eager longing here literally has the idea with an outstretched head. Think of a turtle. A turtle can take his head and then he stretches it out. Well, creation, now these are God's words, not mine. So creation, nature about us, is craning its head, stretching it out, waiting in anticipation for what? The revealing of the sons of God here, okay? The revealing of the sons of God. And the sons of God in glory, because we'll get to it. All right, now notice verse 20. It says, "For the creation was subjected to futility." Now, King James uses the word vanity. All right? What's yours say there, Dan? Verse 20.
Futility.
Futility, okay? To futility. Brother Bill in the Universal Version translates it like this: disappointing misery. It's a disappointing misery, say, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. Now watch. Why disappointing misery or futility or vanity? Because creation was created for a purpose. And man's sin, Adam's sin, when he fell, all right, robbed creation of the joy of fulfilling the purpose God had for it. So what it's reaching out for is this expectation of the appearing of the sons of God, so that creation, can be what it's supposed to be. What's the Army ad? You see? Be all you can be. Say, be all you can be here. So it was subjected to futility or vanity, literally evil. Not willingly. Creation didn't want to go through this, but somebody subjected it to creation. With a hope, though. In hope, it says. So who subjected it? Because of him who subjected it? God. It's God that subjected it. It's God that made the declarations. Okay, which we'll see here in a minute. Alright? Listen, in recreation, when you're back in Genesis chapter number 1, verses 3 to 31, alright? The purpose of recreation was for the purpose of man. He prepared it all, then put man here, right? Adam and Eve. So creation had a purpose in relationship to whom? To man. Come on back to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter number 1. Notice with me beginning verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on this earth." So, the creation here was to be subjected to whom? To man. Man was the authority, right? So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female, he created them. This is the greatest gospel message you ever heard prior to Paul's gospel. That man was made in the image of what? Of whom? Of God. Of the Godhead. And God blessed them, verse 28. God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." Notice that, subdue it. What's the word subdue there mean, do you think? No, it has more protected. Okay? Protected. Same when you're going to read in chapter 2 about the garden. To protect it. Okay? And have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. This isn't a conquering thing. Alright? For creation is in tune with God here, and the purpose that God made creation for, and that was for man. What kind of man? An innocent man. Now watch what he says. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with its seed and its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was what? It was very, very good. Okay? So then I go over to chapter 2 and verse 15. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it, to protect it. Alright? Protect it. That's the whole thing. Now, what kind of man was he at that time? He was at least innocent here. But I come back to Hebrews chapter 2, read verses 5 to 9. "For it was not to the angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him a little lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his what? Now, in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside his control. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. But we see Jesus in the next verse. All right? Now, the thing that we see, that this could apply to Adam in his innocent state. God put nature under him. Do you follow that? All right? He put it under him. And that's why when you come back to Romans 8, please, and verse 20, Romans 8, verse 20, excuse me, "For the creation was subjected in disappointing misery, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it. Subjected it. Who subjected it? I think it's God. Genesis chapter 3, verses 19 or 17 to 19, if you're keeping notes. Because nature now is returned to a place of death. It's now to bring forth thorns and thistles. Now you have storms and earthquakes, all this sort of thing. And it was because of man that the ground was cursed, but who cursed it? God made the declaration here. So when we're talking about subjected in vanity, not willingly, watch what we have here. How about the woman, Eve? Sorrow and submission to the rule of her husband. Sorrow bringing in children, right? The man, sorrow in connection with the provision of his daily food, with death and the dissolution at the end. In other words, dust thou art, dust they're going to what? Return. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs when we're looking at this. The earth is cursed is the ground for thy sake. Genesis 3. The animal creation. Now think about this. I'll give you the verses. I'm not going to read them. What did God make for Adam and Eve? Coats. Where did he get those from? Yeah, kill an animal. Or animals to make those coats. So those animals meant death. Say. How about Genesis chapter 9, verses 2 and 3? Let's go back there. Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. Well, watch what it says. The fear of you and the dread of you shall come upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, and upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. They were supposed to be in subjection to him. Now they're fearful of him. Okay? Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. Do you ever have rattlesnake?
No.
It's good white meat.
Yeah.
You'd enjoy it.
Tastes like chicken.
Tastes like chicken. There you go, Carl. Okay? But at any rate, you see the difference here? What's happening?
Yeah.
All right? See, there's a return to the death situation. So with the woman, with the man, with the earth itself, with the animal creation, all in vanity, say, or futility. Think about this. Who were the first two children born that are recorded for us?
Abel and Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel. And what did Cain become? He became a murderer. What's Abel mean?
Meadows?
What's that?
Meadows?
No. Vanity. Vanity is what Abel means. All you do is look it up and you can find that. It means vanity. So the firstborn was a murderer. The secondborn was Abel in vanity. The productive powers of the earth became vain. Sweat of thy brow. Thorns and thistles would come through. And instead of everything for good, for food, see, they'd have to labor at it. That sort of thing. The sweat of the face, the sorrow, and even conception and childbirth. And it all ends in death.
Yeah.
Vanity. See? So what is the hope of creation? Romans chapter 8, one more time. Now watch what happens here. Okay, as we look at this. Verses 21 and 22. That the creation itself will be set free from its bondage. So it was bondage to corruption. Susan was sitting yesterday, we were sitting and it started snowing in what else? It's nice, soft snow. The kind you like to walk in. You know. That kind of stuff. And then she goes, the backyard's just waiting for me. For springtime. Now Miss Susan and I will go out and we're going to work. We're going to work and we're going to produce much glistening on her part and sweat on my part. All right, in there to make it our Garden of Eden. All right, back there, a place to sit and enjoy our coffee and our Bibles and our fellowship together. All right, so it's in bondage. Bondage to what? Corruption. And notice what it says in verse, and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. The earth, the creation, is looking for the same freedom and glory that the children of God have. Can you see that? Okay. And then 22, for we know that the whole creation has been growing together in pains of childbirth until now. It's not growing in death. It's growing to bring forth a new creation. All right? New creation. Now watch it. It's in bondage, first of all, to corruption. This will be fun for you. Come to Joel. Hosea, Joel, right? Chapter number 1. Chapter 1 here and verse number 7. Where it says, it has laid waste my vine and splintered my fig tree. It has stripped off their bark and thrown it down. Their branches are made white. Verse 10. The fields are destroyed. The ground what? Mourns. Get the same idea in Hosea 4:3. Because the grain is destroyed, the wine dries up, the oil languishes. Verse 11. Be ashamed, O tillers of the soil. Wail, O vine dressers, for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field has what? Perish. What's perish mean?
Die.
It's died. The vine dries up, the fig tree languishes, pomegranate, palm, and apple, all the trees of the field are dried up. And gladness dries up from the children of what? Nature dries up, and it affects man.
Yeah.
Why do prices fluctuate in the grocery store?
Well, because of drought or water. Too much.
Sure.
Too much.
Only been too much,
Or
not enough.
Yeah.
Prices fluctuate, you see. Nowadays, what's happening in our oil, I don't know if you know this about the oil production.
So much.
We have so much that they're shutting things down. People are being unemployed.
Yeah.
Okay, which is a shame. Now, down to verse 18, where it says this, how the beasts groan. The herds of the cattle are perplexed because there is no pasture for them. Even the flocks of the sheep do what? Suffer. Do y'all see that? Verse 19. To you, O Lord, I call, for fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and flame has burned all the trees of the field. Even the beasts of the field pant for you. What's pant mean?
Cry out.
Well, they have heart.
Well, it's like a dog is with his tongue hanging out, panting. It's looking to God.
Yeah.
See? What is? The beasts of the field. Because the water brooks are dried up and fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness. Come over to Jeremiah chapter 12. Let me just give you a couple more. Jeremiah chapter 12. And notice verse 4 here. How long will the land do what? Mourn. And the grass of every field wither. For the evil of those who dwell in it, the beasts and the birds are swept away, because they say, he will not see our land or later in. So when you're looking in the scriptures, and I have many, many more that we could look at, but this time prevents it. You see that creation, even the earth, mourns. Why is it mourning?
It suffers too.
Suffers. Come back to the Psalm with me. 98. Psalm 98. And verses 4 through 9. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth in joyous songs and sing praises. Sing praises to the Lord with the lyre. With the lyre and the sound of melody. With the trumpet and the sound of the horn. Make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. Let the sea roar, and all that fills it. The world and all those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the hills sing for joy together before the Lord. For he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness and the people with equity. Now here we're looking at the second coming. What's going to happen to the earth at the second coming? It's going to be renewed. It won't be the new heaven, new earth, but it's going to be renewed. Let's come back to Isaiah, please. See, the creation has a hope. The hope is seeing the glory of the sons of God. Chapter 11, notice 6 through 9. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. And the calf and the lion and the fatted calf together. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze. Their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play with the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy. In all my holy mountain, where the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters are cover the sea. And again, this is when this bondage is released from them. Come over to chapter 55, please. Chapter 55. Notice verse number 12. For you shall go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing. And all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Why? Because they've been set forth free from the corruption that was caused because of the fall of man. So creation has a what then? Hope. Is that what Romans 8 tells us? Sure does. It has a hope. Now, next time, probably next week, we'll look at the hope of man and the hope of the Spirit of God. Now, I'll say this to you. The hope of creation is to be able to fulfill the purpose for which God made it.